The studio was buzzing with energy the moment Steve Harvey stepped onto the stage. The crowd cheered, clapped, and whooped like they always do. The lights were bright, the music upbeat, and Steve had that familiar smile stretched across his face. Half mischief, half heart. In his hand, the cue cards. On his face, the grin. The vibe was exactly what you'd expect from a Steve Harvey show. Light, funny, full of warmth. Then the cameras panned to the entrance and Keanu Reeves walked in. He wasn't flashy. No big entrance, just a man in dark jeans, a plain black shirt, and a simple blazer. He gave a short wave, nodded, and smiled softly, not with the kind of smile that says, "Look at me," but more like, "Thank you for having me." He seemed a little uncomfortable with all the attention, like he'd rather disappear into the back of the crowd than sit in the spotlight. But he took his seat next to Steve, and the two shook hands. Then something subtle happened. Keanu's eyes dropped just for a second to the small cross hanging around Steve's neck, and everything shifted. It wasn't loud, the crowd didn't notice, but if you were really watching, really feeling the room, the tone dropped. From surface-level fun to something quieter, something real. Steve leaned in with a smile, maybe ready to joke, but Keanu beat him to it. He looked at Steve, paused for a moment, and asked in a low voice, "Can I tell you something I've never revealed in public?" The crowd didn't make a sound. It wasn't shock. It was something else. Stillness. You could feel it. Then he added, "What I'm about to say, it changed my life." What came next would change Steve's too. From the start, Steve kept it easy. That's what he's good at, making people feel at home. He told the crowd how much he respected Keanu, not just as an actor, but as a person. "The media calls him the nicest guy in Hollywood," he said. "I say he's the most real guy in Hollywood." The audience clapped loud for that one, and Keanu, as usual, looked like he didn't know what to do with the praise. He chuckled, almost shy, and shook his head. They talked for a bit. Stories from movie sets, long days, subway rides where Keanu gave up his seat like it was nothing. Steve joked. Keanu smiled. The audience laughed. Everything felt smooth, effortless. But then Steve shifted the topic just a little. "People don't really know how generous you are," he said. "You've helped crews on set, given away parts of your salary, even helped strangers on the street." Keanu didn't play it up. He just shrugged and said softly, "It's just the right thing to do." That's when things started to dip below the surface. Steve looked at Keanu differently. Now, he touched the cross around his neck, the small crucifix that rested just over his heart. "You talk about silence like you know it well," he said. Keanu looked back at him, steady. "Silence has been my companion for a long time," he replied. And in that moment, the air in the room changed. It wasn't just a show anymore. It was two men, one asking, one answering, with the kind of honesty that doesn't come around often. You could feel it. Something real was about to break through. The room was already quiet, but now it felt like even the walls were listening. Keanu sat with his hands resting loosely, eyes steady but carrying something heavy behind them. Steve, for once, didn't jump in with a question or a joke. He waited. And Keanu started to speak. Slowly, carefully, like the words had weight. "I didn't have the easiest start," he said. "My dad left when I was little. We moved around a lot. I never really had a place that felt like home." He looked down for a second, then back up. "And my sister, she was sick for a long time, leukemia. I watched her fight something I couldn't fix." The room got stiller. People leaned forward without even realizing it. Then, years later, "My daughter was stillborn," Keanu said. "And not long after that, Jennifer, the woman I loved, she died in a car accident." He paused. His voice didn't crack, but it thinned out like a thread pulled too tight. It was like life just kept taking. Steve didn't speak. His hand moved slowly over the cross on his chest. The crowd didn't move either. Everyone was just there with him, feeling it. Keanu kept going. "People always ask how I stay humble or quiet or kind. But when you lose like that, lose people you love, one after another, you stop seeing the world the same way. Fame doesn't mean anything. Money doesn't fix anything. None of it matters when the person you want to share it with is gone." He looked off for a moment, like something passed in front of his eyes. A memory, maybe, or just silence. Grief isn't always loud, he said. Sometimes it's just the silence that wins. It sneaks in and takes up space, and suddenly, you don't recognize yourself anymore. He took a breath, then leaned in slightly, like he was about to share something no one else had ever heard. There was one night, he said, I hadn't slept, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even move from the couch. It wasn't just sadness, it was nothingness. Like I was underwater and everything was muffled. He paused. I didn't want to be alive, but I wasn't trying to die either. I just didn't care anymore. Steve's eyes were locked on him now, wide and full. Keanu continued, his voice soft but clear. I was scrolling through my phone, just trying to feel something, and I saw this video. It was you, Steve. You were standing on stage talking about pain, talking about God, about how he doesn't waste hurt, about how storms don't come to destroy, they come to shape. Steve blinked hard. He remembered the clip. He'd filmed it late one night after a show, no script, just his heart. You weren't preaching, Keanu said. You weren't trying to be deep or perfect. You were just talking, like a man who'd been through some things, and it felt real, it felt honest. Keanu glanced at Steve's chest. And you were wearing that cross, that same one. His voice dropped even lower. That message, that symbol, in that moment, it reminded me I wasn't invisible, that maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair, that maybe I still mattered. The crowd stayed still. No coughs. No movement. Just breath held and eyes locked. I watched that video 3 times, Keanu said. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed it to sink in. And the next morning, and for the first time in weeks, I got up. I stood up. I didn't feel fixed. I didn't feel strong. But I felt something. I felt hope. Steve covered his mouth for a second, trying to hold back his reaction. He looked down at the crucifix on his chest like it had just gained new meaning. Keanu leaned back, letting the silence sit with them. I never told anyone this, he said. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't think the moment would ever come. But now, sitting here with you, it just felt right. Steve finally spoke, voice rough. I didn't know. He whispered. I was just talking from the heart. And that's what saved me, Keanu said. You weren't trying to rescue anyone. You were just being you, and that was enough. He looked at Steve again. Sometimes you don't need to have the answers. Sometimes you just need to remind someone they still exist, that they still have a shot. The emotion in the room wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was deep, real, unshakable. And in that moment it was clear. This wasn't about a movie or a show or 2 men on stage. This was about one soul reaching another, through pain, through silence, through something as simple as a late-night message and a small cross hanging from someone's neck. The room stayed quiet, but something had shifted. Not just in the crowd, in Steve. You could see it in his face, the way his eyes glistened, the way his fingers kept moving slowly over the cross on his chest, like he was holding on to something more than just jewelry. Keanu had shared his pain, laid it out with honesty, and now he was sitting there with a kind of calm that didn't come from being finished, but from being free. Then Keanu looked at Steve and said something that turned the moment upside down. You think you're just telling jokes, he said. You think you're just helping people get through their day with a laugh, but Steve, you're saving lives. Steve blinked like the words didn't land right away. I don't think you know the weight your voice carries, Keanu continued. You speak like a man who's been broken, but never gave up. That's why people listen to you. That's why your words stick. Steve tried to respond, but Keanu wasn't done. I remember something you said in that video, he said. I've never forgotten it. He paused, made sure Steve was looking right at him. You said, God doesn't always call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Steve's lips parted just slightly. His hand moved again over the crucifix. Keanu's voice softened. And you said that sometimes your pain is your purpose, that God uses people who've been through something, because they speak a language that can reach people no one else can. Then Keanu leaned forward a little, eyes steady. That's you, Steve. You think you're just a host, a comedian, a guy with a mic. But you're more than that. You're A minister in disguise. Steve swallowed hard. He was quiet for a moment and then asked something almost in a whisper. Why me? Keanu didn't flinch. Because God chooses the overlooked, he said. He chooses the ones who don't look the part, the ones who've cried in the dark, the ones who never thought they were enough, but showed up anyway. Steve looked down now, his hands resting over the cross, his shoulders rising and falling with a slow breath. You've felt pain, Keanu said. Real pain. And that's the thing, people who've never been through anything can't talk about healing, but you can, because you've been there. You speak to the hurting like someone who actually knows what hurt feels like. Then Keanu added, you carry light even when you don't see it, even when you're tired, even when you're just trying to survive the day. That light, it still reaches people. The silence in the room wasn't empty, it was full. Full of everything unsaid, everything felt, everything breaking open under the weight of truth. Keanu looked down at Steve's chest and said, that crucifix you wear, it's not just a symbol, it's a signal, a reminder. And the night I saw it, I didn't see a celebrity. I saw a man holding on to hope. Steve sat back slowly, like the words were settling inside him. His eyes were red, but he wasn't hiding it anymore. You reached me, Keanu said. You lifted me, you reminded me that I wasn't done, that maybe I still had something to give. And I needed you to hear that. Not from the crowd, not from the internet, from me. Then he stood up, not in a big moment kind of way, just quietly, with purpose. Steve stood too. They faced each other. No words, not yet. The audience didn't move. No clapping, no shouting, just quiet. Like everyone knew they were witnessing something bigger than a show, something sacred. And then, with a voice that didn't need to be loud to be strong, Keanu said one last thing. You think you're just out here making people laugh, Steve, but you're doing more than that. You're giving people a reason to keep going. Steve's eyes filled again, and this time the tears came with no fight. He nodded like he finally saw himself the way others had for years. You were a lighthouse for me, Keanu said. Now it's my turn to tell you, you still are. Keanu stood in front of Steve, the studio still wrapped in silence. His voice was soft, steady. No acting, no script, just truth. I remember something else you said, he began. You said, sometimes your comedy is just the disguise God uses to carry hope. Steve's eyes closed as the words hit. His shoulders trembled, and he didn't try to wipe away the tears anymore. He just let them fall. That line, it had come from a place deep inside him when he'd spoken it years ago. He never imagined it would come back to him like this. Keanu watched him for a moment, then said, You're a minister, Steve. You just wear a suit instead of a collar. And right there, that simple line carried more weight than anything else. Steve wasn't being praised for being funny or famous or even faithful. He was being seen and fully. For what he really was. Under all the titles and shows and smiles, the air in the studio felt heavy, but not with sadness, with something sacred. Like the truth had finally settled, and everyone was just trying to sit still enough to feel it. Steve looked down at the cross on his chest again. His voice was quiet, raw. I've thought about quitting, he admitted, walking away from all of this. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure it mattered. I didn't know if I was really making a difference. Keanu didn't blink. It does, he said. I'm living proof. Steve let out a shaky breath and nodded. He didn't say anything back right away. He didn't need to. That moment, being told his quiet faith and his words had pulled someone back from the edge, it said more than any standing ovation ever could. Steve slowly turned toward the audience. His eyes were red, his voice uneven, but there was no shame in it, just honesty. Out of everything I've ever done on this stage, he said, this was the greatest gift I've ever received. He paused, looking out at the silent crowd. I didn't expect it. I didn't even know I needed it, but I thank God for it. Then he looked at Keanu again, the man who'd come on stage, as a guest, but now stood before him as something more, a mirror, a reminder. With a soft smile, Steve lifted his head and said, Let's pray. Keanu stepped forward and they embraced, not as star and host, but as two men who understood each other in a way that went beyond words. The audience rose to their feet, not to cheer but just to stand with them. It didn't feel right to clap, it felt better to just be present. As the camera slowly began to pull back, a quiet voiceover settled in, not loud, not dramatic, just true. Sometimes the people who make us laugh the hardest are the ones who've cried the most, and sometimes are the ones we're meant to save end up saving us. The lights dimmed, no music played, the screen faded to black, and in the silence, something stayed behind. Something real,